Welcome to the program, everyone. Today I want to talk about this thing right behind me. You might recognize this symbol. It's Bitcoin. Now, what I want to talk about today is that there's some dramatic things that are happening for the network in the next few months. I want to talk about those. But in order for me to talk about those things, the halving event that's happening in April, for me to talk intelligently about that and tell you about I can tell you what's going to happen with the price. But in order to understand that, you need to understand the network. And once you understand the network itself, then you can sort of understand how all this comes together. So first, let me talk about this. And I'm sorry I'm wearing black on black and just got the, just if it looks like just a floating head, sorry about that. But that's hopefully with the Bitcoin right here, it doesn't look too weird. But let's talk about the Bitcoin network, okay? There's a few things you need to know about the Bitcoin network, and I'll try to be as simple as possible here. There are two things to know about it. There's miners and there's validators. Now, what do all those fancy terms mean? What do miners do and what do validators do? Well, first off, you need to understand what the Bitcoin network is. The Bitcoin network is just a recording of transactions or blocks that are chained together. That's why it's called a blockchain. Every block is linked to the one before it and the one after it. That's how it's chained together. So the blocks are created by the network. And the way that the blocks are created is that there is a math problem that's given out by the code. Okay, the Bitcoin code is basically runs all the time, and it's not really changed. It's only changed if there's a proposal to change it and then the miners vote on it. But for the most part, let's just assume that it's not going to change. Okay, it's simpler just to think the Bitcoin code hasn't changed, and the miners run that code constantly. That's their job. They are the worker bees of the network, and they are the lifeblood of it. Now, I'll talk about decentralized and centralized in a moment, but first, the worker bees, those are the miners, and those are fancy computers that their one purpose, their one job only, is to turn electricity into Bitcoin. And the way that they do this is that they run a copy of the network, and they run the program. Their job is to guess and answer to a math problem. Now, that math problem is given to them every 10 minutes, okay, on average, okay? And the only way they can get the answer to it, the first one that gets the answer gets the prize of being able to write the next block, and they get the block reward. That amount gets cut in half every 4 years, and that's coming up in April. That's called the halvening, or the halving, depending on your vernacular, but whatever terms you use, the reward gets cut in half, okay? So now, like right now, you're getting 6.25 Bitcoin if you win, or you have a miner that wins. That miner gets 6.25 Bitcoin if they gets to write their next block. And the only way you get to write the next block is if you get as close of an answer as the network is allowing for a 2-week period. Now, how does it know to do that, or how does it change it? So first off, let's think about the accuracy of the answer. The accuracy of the answer is determined by the hash rate of the network. Now, that's another fancy term. Basically, that's just the number of guesses per second that the entire total of all the miners in the network for the last 2 weeks, that's what's used to figure out, okay, you have this many guesses per second. That's what we're seeing in the network. So based on that, the network decides, it runs the software and calculates, okay, let's just say it's running, 10 trillion guesses per second. That's not the right answer, but I'm just going to give that to you. But based on that 10 trillion per second guessing, it will say, like, okay, based on that number of guesses, how difficult do I need to make the math problem so that I only get one accurate answer, or one answer that's within the accuracy window every 10 minutes? So to think about this, think about throwing darts on a dartboard, okay? All the miners are doing is throwing darts at the dartboard, okay? And their job is to hit that bullseye and get really, really, really close to the center. And that accuracy to the center of the bullseye is determined every 2 weeks by the network based on how many darts that are thrown per second. That's the whole game, all right? So the miner's job is to guess as often as possible. That's the hash rate. And you get the more advanced of a miner you have, the more guesses you get. That's just the way that the program works. So it's constantly running, and it's making lots of noise and lots of heat from the electricity it's running on, and it's guessing until it gives out an answer. So here's the second part of the network. Okay, you've got the miners now. The miners are guessing. The network has provided the code and has provided the accuracy every 2 weeks. Now you need a part of the network that will confirm the accuracy is right. So think about you're playing, here's another analogy. Think about like bingo, a bingo parlor, right? There's 100 people, thousands of people maybe. They're all playing bingo and someone yells bingo. I got the right answer, okay? You need someone to come over and look at their card and look at their answers and say, yes, we have a winner. That's the winner for that 10 minutes. So that's what the job of a validator is. So if a miner for the Bitcoin network says, bingo, I got the answer, I think I'm within the accuracy window, a validator is provided that answer, confirms that answer and does the math itself and confirms that it's accurate enough. It says, yes, you indeed won. Jeff's miner gets the reward for this period, right, which is right now 6.25 Bitcoin. So roughly, I'm gonna say 50,000 for Bitcoin roughly right now, which will kind of timestamp this video. So about $320,000 worth of Bitcoin is given to that person or that person's miner. And then the job is to put out another math problem, and then it just continues and continues and continues. So what happens? So the validator's job is to validate that and also to set the difficulty every 2 weeks, right? That's all it's doing. Is that the validator's only job is to run a copy of the entire Bitcoin source code. All right, or I'm sorry, the record of all the blocks. The validator has a list of the blocks all the way back to the Genesis block, the very first block, and it just adds a block to it every 10 minutes. That's all it does. It is a complete history of Bitcoin. That's why you can see, you got the whole blockchain, you can look and see all the addresses and where they've gone, backwards and forwards, because they're all the blocks are chained together. You can see all the addresses and see all the relationships. And you can see the new block and how it's recorded. The other thing the validators do is if there's a tie, or like if let's say the two miners say bingo at once, okay, it's supposed to break the tie. Sometimes what happens is that miner A, Jeff's miner, let's say Steve's miner, Jeff's miner and Steve's miner both give an answer at the same time, and that's given to the network. Well, the network, they say we got an answer. Yes, that's their first job. Everybody else go keep the network running and start looking for the next block. Now they need to figure out if it's Jeff's turn, if it's Jeff or Steve that gets to write that block, and then keep going. And that could take a little while to figure out the timestamps. So what that happens, and sometimes you'll have a spur of the blockchain, like you have a block that goes, there's Jeff leading the next block, and where Steve's miner is leading the next block. And after a few blocks, it will be able to figure out which one it got done first, and it'll kill the one that's like came in second place. So that is like there'll be like a spur on the blockchain, and there'll be an orphan block, and it'll just say, okay, Steve finished second, Jeff won, and then we're going to go with Steve's chain. And the validators confirm that. So they write all the correct blocks and who wrote them and so on, and they keep a record of all the blocks in the blockchain. That's how it works. And they don't care what miner does it. All they know is that the accuracy of that block and who gets to write it and who gets to put the transactions in that block are put in that network. That's what validators do. So, decentralization. We want to talk about that. That's a big term, and that's a big important thing, because the more decentralized the network you are, the less you are suspect, or less you are that someone can come along and wreck the network. So there's the decentralization of the miners and the decentralization of the validators. If all the validators, so decentralization, just think about if everything is all in the same room. Okay, if everything's all in the same room and something happens to that room, then you're not decentralized, then it can all be taken out. So let's think about a bank. I'll think about a big bank. You can have lots of branches and lots of ATMs, but they all are centralized because there's one bank that governs them all. Okay, so you can have an ATM near you and a branch near you. That's great. Those are all decentralized access points, but it's all centralized because if that bank fails, then everything gets wiped out. So the analogy here is that you can have miners anywhere. Miners are just supporting the network. What really is important to support the network is not just the miners, but also where the validators are. That's why there can be a validator running in outer space, because it doesn't require nearly as much power as the miners do, because they don't have to make all those guesses. They're just recording every 10 minutes a new block. So you have validators all over the globe, and those are all decentralized and supporting the network. Now you get no benefit from running the node, right? It actually costs you to run a node, but what a lot of miners do is that's a cost of doing business, because this is their business. This is their lifeblood, is that they need to have the network up and running. So as a kind of a thank you to the network and their job, or their lifeblood and their economics of their business. They'll run a copy of the node, so they're supporting the network even though they're getting no rewards for doing so. So validators really don't get any rewards, but they're supporting the network. So that's what a validator does compared to a worker bee, and all the worker bees are the miners. Now, what's coming up now in 2 months, in the middle of April, based on the current timeline, it's not based on a date, it's based on a block number, and those blocks are roughly every 10 minutes, which can vary based on the difficulty, which goes back to that hash rate calculation. Every 2 weeks, based on the number of guesses or number of darts that are being thrown at that dartboard, based on that total hash rate, every 2 weeks the network says, okay, now there's more guesses or there's fewer guesses, so it changes the difficulty and changes the accuracy of how close to the center of the bullseye that dart needs to be. And that determines who gets to write the next block. That is the entire job of the entire network. Now, with all that said, I'm going to pause there and make a second video and talk about the economics of being a Bitcoin miner, and based on all that and how the halving or halvening is going to impact that event coming in a couple months. So what are your thoughts? I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, subscribe. Please send this out to someone who wants to learn more about Bitcoin. And I'll leave it there for now. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.